Assalamu alaikum. You're watching Views and News, and I'm Faisal Rahman live from our Islamabad studio. Today we'll be talking about this new wave of terrorism in Pakistan. Whether you talk about the attacks on the armed forces, or you talk about this latest incident that happened yesterday, in which around 8 precious lives were lost, 125 people were injured. That took place on Kohat Road in a seminary close to Peshawar. Now, the problem is that when we hear Ajit Doval saying that offensive defense is what we want, primarily they are trying to destabilize Pakistan, not only Pakistan, the entire region. The kind of involvement they have in Afghanistan, the way they are using the Afghan soil against Pakistan, that is very obvious, and we have shown the world the proofs about it. Now, at the same time, when you hear something happening in Balochistan or Urmara for that matter, 21 soldiers were killed in one day in Urmara, and then there was another attack on a military convoy in Waziristan. So you can well imagine what's going on in this country. And this is not a recent phenomena. This goes up, this comes down. Intelligence can protect you till a certain level, even if they end up unfolding 99 incidents. But if one is not unfolded, the results are right there. So to talk about this, the Indian involvement, and talking about the recent wave of violence, targets on the civilian side, terrorist attacks in Peshawar, we'll be talking about that also in our today's program. Recent surge in terrorist attacks all over Pakistan is going to be another major area of discussion today. Implementation of National Action Plan, NAP. Now, that is also very important. Where do we stand as we speak on that regard? And Indian involvement in terrorism in Pakistan. Now, that has to come to an end. Or what sort of a counter narrative should Pakistan develop? We'll be talking about that. Let me introduce you to our panelists. We have with us in our studio on my right is Javed Siddique Saab. Siddique Saab needs no introduction, is a senior journalist, anchor, and also a writer. Thank you very much, sir. And we have with us Brigadier Retired Tipu Sultan Saab, senior analyst. Thank you very much, sir, for your time. And we'll be also talking to Syed Muhammad Ali, who is an expert on foreign affairs and Pak-India relations. Thank you very much, Syed Muhammad Ali, for your time as well. Let me start off from you, Siddique Saab. Very tragic incident. Again, a soft target they chose. There was this bomb blast. I was looking at the visuals. There was this crater, so somebody had placed it there. It wasn't a suicidal bombing. Secondly, youngsters, primarily young kids. Look at the number of injured. I mean, let's start off from there, sir.
I think this has happened in Pakistan after a long interregnum. The most horrifying incident that took place in Pakistan was the attack on APS. And hundreds of students were killed in that unfortunate and horrible terrorist act. Now this is a second one after a long interval, and this reminds us of the fact that Pakistan is yet not terrorism-free country, and it keeps happening again and again. And unfortunately, we have our neighbors on both sides of the border who have been responsible for most devastating terrorist activities in Pakistan. Pakistan has lost almost 70,000 people, including the armed forces members,
and
the police, the civilians, the innocent civilians who were just going into the markets, and they were gunned down or killed, or they lost their lives in explosions. So after a long exercise, the Pakistani military and the other forces, they joined hands, and Operation Zarb-e-Azb was launched. And following that, Raddul Fasad, another operation was launched. As a result of these two operations, Pakistan was able to overpower and I would say to decimate the safe havens of the terrorists, particularly in North Waziristan. The Western world, particularly the United States of America, was putting a huge pressure on Pakistan to start an operation against these foreign terrorists and terrorists who have made safe havens in border areas of Pakistan in the north Waziristan. Pakistan started it. Pakistan successfully eliminated those people.
I think the
Those
only
elements.
army who has been able to eliminate
Exactly.
terrorism
And
from
the
those areas.
country
Yes.
was almost peaceful for a long period of time, almost 2 years, more than 2 years. And this has happened again. Some incidents of terrorism have been taking place in Balochistan, which is Balochistan is more vulnerable, to foreign
Remember,
hands.
sir, what happened in Urmara a
Exactly.
week ago?
And many other people were killed in Balochistan, and the Balochistan seems to be a soft target for those anti-Pakistan elements and the forces who want to destabilize Pakistan through Balochistan. And again, they have come to the KPK province now. I think the Indians, everybody knows, the RA is very active in destabilizing Pakistan. We keep hearing the threats from the eastern border. Ajit Doval, you have just quoted saying that we will take this war into the country, I mean the neighboring country, which is China and Pakistan. So we can expect these kind of incidents more on our side of the border. So we have to be very cautious and careful, and I think our security forces, our intelligence forces need to be on extra alert to avert these crises.
Definitely, sir. Brigadier Saab, Javed Siddique Saab was talking about the APS incident. Precious lives were lost, over 150 people, mostly children. And the way they were massacred, I mean, can't even begin to think about it, sir. And I still remember Siraj Resani Saab's martyrdom, sir, I would say. What a huge loss in that bomb blast as well, because he was so pro-Pakistan and he hated India and he was targeted. I mean, and there is a long list of such bomb blasts, sir. Brigadier Saab, whatever we have done so far, I think that has been done brilliantly. But now it seems that there is going to be more soft targets available to the enemy to destabilize Pakistan politically. Because after the show of PDM and all, I mean, they would be finding reasons to go after the government also, sir. Don't you think this is the time that rather than fighting amongst each other, they should be able to devise a plan and think for Pakistan for a moment, sir?
Well, Faisal, I think more than anybody else, the people of Pakistan have to realize what is happening to our country and how the enemy is succeeding within the territories of Pakistan. It has been a very old saga, and we don't understand the fundamental difference between Afghanistan, Syria, Iraq and Libya is the armed forces of Pakistan and the institutions of Pakistan, including the democratic institutions and other institutions that be in the government. That is the fundamental difference why Pakistan has survived all those enemies, all that blitz against our nation of terrorism from across the border and from within. Now, the situation is absolutely different as compared to yesteryears. Now what has happened is that all the political parties have gotten together in opposition and they are singing songs which are very sweet melodies for our enemies. And they are rejoicing. Look at the Indian media, how are they rejoicing the opposition onslaught on the government and the armed forces of Pakistan. Isn't it very unfortunate? Those people who have lost their sons, who lost their husbands, who lost their mothers and teachers and students and children for the country, what would they be thinking? That the agenda of the enemy is being furthered and helped by the people of Pakistan, and they seem like fifth columnists in the hands of RAW and CIA and the forces that be. Now, realizing that the Indians have long ago put the Kashmir struggle into a terrorism basket and accused Pakistan of terrorism in the eyes of the world community. And the European Union, the Americans have been looking on the other side. And now that they want to have a bulwark against China, And they have been demanding Pakistan that we should accept India as a pivotal state of the region, which we have not. And meanwhile, when they were defeated in Afghanistan, they kept quiet. Before that, they had wrong notions, and the US president was telling Pakistan that we'll hit Pakistan at the time and place war choosing, and you will not know, in his new South Asia policy. And then he realized that he has been defeated in Afghanistan and they need Pakistan. And now what has happened is that they are again turning on the other side. So the relationship between Pakistan and the United States has been of a roller coaster thing, and they have never been a reliable ally to Pakistan. Even in 50s and 60s, in 65, what had happened was that the US telegrams are declassified after 20 or 25 years, and the US ambassador here in Pakistan writes to Washington that India and Pakistan are at war in 65, and if the Americans have to choose any side, it is India and not Pakistan. We being the members of SEATO and CENTO at that time. So you can imagine the strategy that the Americans want to adopt in South Asia vis-a-vis Pakistan. And we should not have any doubt right now, because only yesterday the Indians and the Americans have concluded a treaty. Now that has got strategic implications. And the good thing about it is that all of our life we have been flying and operating the American equipment on GPS and their satellite imagery and whatnot, and they would know where our aircrafts are operating and what are we doing, because they had all that information, and the equipment was fitted with
But aren't we switching to the Chinese now?
Yeah, that's what exactly I want to say. What the Chinese have done is that they have an absolutely independent system of fifth generation and technology to connected with the satellite hybrid warfare thing in fifth generation. In South China Sea, I think about 4 or 5 weeks back, when the Americans took their carriers into that place, the Chinese demonstrated to the Americans that we can blind you,
By firing the
and
missiles.
we can take you out of the communication at any time that we want. They were flabbergasted. They were very worried. So although
A lot of people believe that even in the fifth generation, this 5G thing, so primarily the Chinese are about 3-4 years ahead of the Americans.
Of course, they're not only ahead on that, those electronic things, they're all.
But do you believe, sir, this current alignment of the Indians with the Americans is going to be a big problem, big hurdle for Pakistan?
Oh, indeed, it's good. What we need to understand, what the people of Pakistan need to understand is that all the strategists over the centuries have been saying that if you want to destroy a country, particularly faced with strife and all that, have a discontentment amongst the people and turn the people against the armed forces of that country, you will succeed. And the people of Pakistan, I am sorry to say, are greatly in numbers who are playing to the tune of the enemy. And the enemy is rejoicing, as I said earlier. And we have to realize what are we doing to our country. The steps that we need that need to be taken are that the people of Pakistan need being educated, and then we have to launch a blistering diplomatic attack on India. What are they doing? And to counter that agreement that the US State Department and the Defense Secretary had with India, I think we are cooperating with China in connectivity and economics and all that. The time has come for regional alliance. The time has come for a very meaningful defensive mechanism between Pakistan, China, Iran, and if Afghans do not want to participate in it, well, we have common borders, we can assert and pressurize them to
Well, sir, a lot needs to be done, a lot has to be done, and obviously when you talk about the regional alliance, that is the future.
The unfortunate thing is, the bottom line is that the people of Pakistan have to realize they don't have to play the end of the enemy.
It's the people which matter. Let me also involve Syed Mohammad Ali. Syed Mohammad Ali, now looking at this recent wave of violence, terrorism, targeting the civilians in Pakistan, I mean, this has been going on for quite some time, but there was a halt on that. Primarily, the military targets or the hard targets were the actual approach regarding the enemy. But sir, now it seems that the schools, madrasas, mosques, churches, I mean, the soft targets primarily would be the next target of the enemy.
Yeah, Faisal, thank you for having me. I think this current wave of terror attacks needs to be seen in the context of four factors. Number one, as your earlier two panelists rightly pointed out, the regional geostrategic environment is undergoing a massive change because primarily the Modi administration's Doval doctrine aimed at isolating Pakistan in the region, strangulating it economically, destabilizing it politically, and militarily keeping it under pressure. So you basically see, because of the Afghan peace process, Pakistan is at the same time, which could be a temporary phase, but for the time being, Pakistan is relevant to Washington, Pakistan is relevant to Beijing, Pakistan is relevant to Moscow, and it has always remained relevant to the Muslim world. So the Indian attempt at isolating Pakistan regionally and globally has failed. Now, due to the Afghan peace process, it also views that the space for India and its intelligence agencies is gradually shrinking in Afghanistan. So, what is happening is not just at the state level, but its proxies and the terrorist outfits, like whether they are BLA, whether this is Daesh, whether it is TTP, they're also feeling the pressure, the heat, and that is why they are, this you see this wave of revival of these terrorist attacks as an evidence of the panic that they are facing. In order to destabilize the process, in order to remain relevant in Afghanistan, in order to harm Pakistan, and also divert our attention from the eastern border. So you see this. There is a context. There is a method to this madness. But we should not lose sight. We should continue firmly and patiently with our commitment of as a friend of the Afghan nation to bring all their segments to the peace process. We should warn Afghanistan that we would not allow their territory to be used against us. And also, as part of the Doval doctrine, you see the ethnic and sectarian fault lines being attempted to be exploited. There is a context. You see, the school of thought which was a target in Afghanistan was different from the school of thought which was a target in Peshawar. So there's a reason. It's part of a strategy to instigate the ethnic and ideological differences within Pakistan and between Pakistan and Afghanistan. So Afghan nation and Pakistani leadership must see through this Indian plan and defeat it by not escalating this spiral of violence with each other.
Ali, there was this bomb blast in Afghanistan the other day. A lot of innocent lives were lost in that as well. Now, when you talk about certain non-state actors, for example, Daesh, the rise of Daesh, let me put it this way, or maybe there could be the presence of Al Qaeda there as well, Hizbul Ahrar for that matter, Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan. I mean, all these non-state actors, they've been paid heavily by the Indians. This was stated by our National Security Advisor, Mohit Yusuf Saab also, that around $10 million were given to them and more money is coming in from left, right and center. Now, don't you think that is the problem? That is the key area where either the government of Afghanistan should do something or there could be a possibility of a launch of an operation on the bordering areas, and then you need to flush them out if they are inside the Afghan territory but on the border side.
Faisal, look, this hybrid warfare is a consequence for three reasons. India recognizes that our conventional land, air, and sea forces are alert and very capable. we have a credible nuclear deterrence. So that reduces the space for direct kinetic operations. So what India and particularly Mr. Doval has planned is indirect and asymmetrical conflict in order to exploit and target the ideological fault lines, the ethnic, linguistic fault lines, and we as a united nation, as a united Pakistani nation, must defeat it by our leadership, our media, our think tanks, our academics must warn the country, the people, that what is the plan. So we should not be used and in as part of it, and we should forge our ranks and defeat and deny India the ability, the attempt to not just exploit the diversity, the ethnic and ideological bouquet that Pakistani nation is within its territory, and also not uh, to be lured into a conflict, spiraling escalation phenomena between Afghanistan and Pakistan. Because the grand strategy is to keep Pakistani capability, attention, focus, resources towards the West, so that there is not enough attention, enough power, enough capability on the Eastern Front. It is very interesting. You must have noticed that it is happening at the same time when Pakistan is holding a very important a trilateral dialogue between China, Pakistan, and Afghanistan. And it is also trying to build economic and social relations between Afghan nation and Pakistan, so that both nations come close and benefit from economic opportunities. So these things are aimed directly at harming the relations between these two nations, which are thousands of
Yes.
years old. And it is about time that both nations recover from the last 41 years of conflict environment and learn and
Important
seize the
point, please. Yes.
opportunities that this the whole region offers, and deny the spoilers, particularly India, the opportunity to harm our relations, so that we remain poor, destabilized, and conflict prone.
All right. Now, a very important point, sir. If you remember, recently there was this visit of Gulbuddin Hikmatyar. Earlier than that, Dr. Abdullah was here. Now, sir, the fundamental question is that it seems that the relationship between the two countries that is improving. One. Secondly, if you look at the kind of engagement which Pakistan has region-wise in order to bring in peace in Afghanistan, that has also been not very much liked by the Indians. Revenge, the concept of having an enemy, that is something which is brewing out there in their minds. Remedies for this.
I think with Dr. Abdullah and Gulbuddin Hikmatyar, the meetings that have taken place between the Pakistani leadership and these two Afghan leaders, Pakistan has urged the Afghan leadership that they should keep an eye on the spoilers of this peace process, which has been backed and supported by Pakistan. So Pakistan is urging the Afghan leadership to be on alert, to be careful and keep a strong eye on the spoilers. And the spoiler is our eastern neighbor, India, because if this space is denied to India, if Afghanistan's space is not allowed to be used against Pakistan by the Indian intelligence agencies and Indian saboteurs, so I think Pakistan will be quite safe from the western border.
So the American engagement that is so close with the Indians, don't you think the Americans would like some sort of a role to be given to the Indians in Afghanistan?
I think Americans are playing it double game.
Always played double
They
game.
have. And you know, at this critical juncture, on the one hand, they recognize that Pakistan has played a very, very important and constructive role in bringing Taliban and the Afghan government on the negotiation table. And they are appreciating it. Not only the United States of America, but all other Western countries. And at the same time, the Americans have started playing a new ball game. And in order to neutralize China or the emergence of China, they are now, going into the agreements and pacts with India. And this recent one, which has strong implications for Pakistan.
For the entire region, I
For
would
the
say,
entire
sir.
region. So the Americans are destabilizing this region. Americans are actually, and the Chinese have made it very clear, and they have warned the United States of America not to play this game. It's very dangerous, fraught with dangers. So I think this is very important. And Pakistani nation has to be very cautious and careful about what is being done by India and how the Indians are hatching these conspiracies against Pakistan to destabilize it. And they are trying to exploit the fault lines within Pakistan. And as you have said that they have given billions of dollars to these Afghan terrorists and other outfits to destabilize Pakistan, to start up, the new operation of terrorism within Pakistani territory. So I think our security forces are well aware of it, but at the same time, our political leadership on both sides of the divide must also realize that this is a very crucial time.
Exactly. That is
And-
what my point was when I asked this question to
Exactly.
Brigadier Saab. Yeah,
So
I want your comment on that also.
Both the government and the opposition should try to understand the implications of the situation. It is a very, very important phase that we are passing through. So we need not provide, I mean, we should not provide them a conducive atmosphere, the enemies of Pakistan.
We are,
which
sir,
could-
unfortunately we are.
Exactly. So that could be exploited against our interests. And we must not allow the space to these
Sir,
foreign
this
agents.
particular bomb blast in a madrasa, what does it say? Primarily because Maulana Saab is really a political giant in Pakistan, the kind of rallies he's holding, the kind of jalsa he had earlier in Quetta. I mean, that was a very decent gathering, whether we admit it or we don't, but I mean, seeing is believing.
I think one reason why this has been done, that's my own evaluation, targeting a madrasa, a soft corner as you have termed it. I think they want to give an impression to the Western world, particularly to the United States and the European countries, that again Pakistan is in the Pakistan is reverting to the religious terrorism, and the madrasas and the schools and other institutions are now being targeted, and Pakistan is now in the grip of a new wave of terrorism.
Now, if you remember Javed Siddique Saab and Brigadier Saab, so many ministers, in particular Sheikh Rashid Saab, has been saying that the conflict between the Shia Sunni, I mean, that's a very, very vulnerable fault line which we have.
It's a fault line.
I think the whole world has. And he was saying that let's hope and pray that this particular Muharram goes smoothly.
I think Pakistan neutralized the Indian plan to exploit this fault line.
Exactly. So now, I think this bomb blast is also a part of the same.
Part of that. It could be a part of that.
It could be a part of that, because to ignite the emotions.
Exactly.
British
Well,
Saab?
they would like to take all cards out of the bag to harm Pakistan. And, Maulvi Fazal is playing a very dangerous game. Commenting on the blast in the madrasa in Peshawar, he said that I call all madrasas to raise their own security forces and all. What is that?
Security force.
What is that? Why is he pressurizing Pakistan? Because he holds a number of madrasas across the border with Afghanistan and in Balochistan, which is in turmoil. Now, this man is so hungry for power to come to Islamabad that on the strategic plane he wants to harm Pakistan and hide behind the ethics of politics and whatnot. It's a very dangerous game that people of Pakistan need to understand that. Talking of Afghanistan and the good relations, then we must never forget the mechanism which exists within Afghanistan. The incumbent government in Kabul is in connivance with the Indians. They have been operating alongside the Americans, and we want to befriend them. Okay, fine. But there is a fundamental difference between the Taliban, who wield power over there, who are negotiating with the Americans, and the government in Kabul, whereby the Indians are losing strategic ground in Afghanistan. And the fundamental difference is that the Taliban want the Americans out, They said that we were ruling Afghanistan in 90s, we want it back, and then we will establish Shura and we don't recognize democracy. Whereas the incumbent government in Kabul, who is not that friendly with Pakistan, who is friendly with the Indians, everybody knows that,
Yes.
want democracy. And Abdullah is acting.
Is Afghanistan ready for democracy? Now that is another $1 million question, and I don't think they
Whether
are.
they are ready for democracy in Kabul or not, point is they cannot operationalize it. They are not ready because the Taliban do
Secondly,
not want.
said democratic setup will not let the Taliban win the election also. That is another
Of course,
issue.
they will
Yeah.
not let. So
But they genuinely want Shura system there.
they genuinely
Yeah.
want Shura system there, and they want the Americans out. And they don't, of late the Taliban started exerting influence in various provinces across the turf of Afghanistan. We must realize that. Now, we have had the diplomatic efforts. We have had a great speech by the Prime Minister at the UN General Assembly, and later on in his virtual address also. He has been addressing the European Union and that World Economic Forum also. He is writing to the world leaders also. But all these things are very good. We must do that. We must have diplomatic offensive. But has it practically worked against India? Do the people sitting in Washington and New Delhi realize that they have to heed to what a well-meaning Prime Minister sits in Islamabad? No. So what we need to do is that we need to visit other areas whereby we can influence the happenings within South Asia. We have our vulnerabilities because we have a common border with Afghanistan. The Indians have been operating from there, and we have unfriendly CIA, and we have ill intentions of America. Unfortunately, if the relationship improved for a certain time, it was because of certain other reasons.
Yeah.
Pakistan, of course, as I said, is relevant to United States, it's relevant to the world, it's relevant to China, and it is indeed, whether the Indians realize that or not, Pakistan stands in their way, and it is bloody well relevant to Indians also. So, what we need to, the Indians have been accusing Pakistan of terrorism. We have not been able to convince the international community on that. And they have occupied Kashmir. The Kashmiris are under siege, and there is a freedom struggle inside Kashmir. It's time for us to support them. It's time for us to look at the Indian.
So we are doing all what we can do within the
It is time
given
for us to
capacity.
look at the Indian vulnerabilities also. I think what Pakistan is, so to say, strategically in a fear, in a shell, and they are unable to take action to counter this because of the pressure of the IMF and the World Bank and the Americans and the FATF and whatnot. I think we have to find a way to get away from that Magnus effect. If we don't, the situation will
Sir,
remain
there are
in flux.
multiple fronts. That is
The-
the most
the
unfortunate part. You talk about the
situation will
economy, you
remain
talk about
in
the
flux.
internal
So-
differences, you talk about the external threat, you talk about Indians.
Yeah.
I mean,
The point is, Faisal,
multiple.
point is that it is simmering for awful lot of time, and it is harming Pakistan, and it is taking Pakistan progressively back, and our strategy has not, it has worked in penny pockets, but it's not fully worked. I think we need to sit down and we need to put our own house in order and to look at the opportunities in the region and to look not only the Indian vulnerabilities, but we have to look at the regional alliance also. We do not realize how great a power the Chinese are emerging into, militarily and economically. They don't need America anymore. They can come into with their gunboats and carriers into South China Sea or Pacific and all that. The Chinese are not bothered because they know they are ahead of them in missile technology. They know they are ahead of them in hybrid war. And let me tell you that the Indians had this agreement with the Americans. They can provide them the information, but they need to have platforms on ground and in the air. We need avionics and equipment to operate.
Sir, the
like
California,
Yeah.
Bangalore.
in Bangalore. And then the Americans,
They have a very good connection.
If the Americans are not being reliable in NATO now as compared to yesteryears, I don't know how is it going to work with the Indians in the future. But I think we have to realize that the real threat is emerging, which is a direct result of the Indian and the US alliance there. And we need to ponder and think about it. Plus, also revisit our strategy vis-a-vis India, and we need to do something which.
High time to build a counter narrative. Let's take this
Absolutely.
point to Sayyid Muhammad Ali. Ali, your take on that point, sir. Don't you think this is the time to have a proper counter narrative? Because we do understand what the Indians want, how they want it, and what exactly they are up to. So don't you think that this is the time?
Faisal, I have a slightly different take. Yesterday, I was addressing an international webinar in New York, and I think a very important and critical function of diplomacy is that Pakistan's relations with major powers, world powers, including and particularly United States, do not reach a point where the Indian influence becomes the dominant factor in the US policy to look at
It has
Pakistan. That is
already
a very,
it has already reached
it
that
is,
level, sir. The Indian influence is there. Howdy
Indian
Modi.
influence is there. So the challenge for our diplomats is greater than ever. It's not just the kinetic domain, it's not just the economic, the FATF, the other things, but it is the greatest challenge for our foreign policy and for our diplomats to ensure that the influence of India does not reach the Beltway to such an extent that Pakistan is seen as a threat. That is very important function of our diplomacy. It's, if I don't want our brave sons and daughters and great military officers like Brigadier Tipu to see, we have concerns from the US, but we should not be seen as a threat. Now, that is a function of our foreign policy, number one. Secondly, what we need to do, we need to, and that is not just the foreign office job, our scholars, our think tanks, our diplomats and
It
media
has to have a
and
collective
anchors like
approach, na?
yourself, we must tell the Americans that right now the American elections are at a very critical stage. We must lobby our diaspora and tell both Republicans and Democratic candidates that building up India militarily will be harmful to US interests in the long run, because
Why would
Indian
that be, sir? Don't you
Would they
think
be
leadership
that they are
convinced?
building
and
up?
values
Would they be convinced like that?
are against the American interests and values in the world. The right of self-determination of Kashmir, the concept of right of self-determination was given by Woodrow Wilson. So it's an American thought. So denying that and supporting Indian exploitation and harming and state terrorism in Kashmir is essentially overlooking the American ideals themselves. So the job is of our scholars, the job is of our anchors, the job is of our think tanks, the job is of our diplomats to ensure we have to contest India not just on the LOC, we have to contest India inside the Beltway, we have to contest India in the Hill, we have to contest India in the American academia, we have to contest Indian diaspora with Pakistani diaspora. So this battlefront is not just Kashmir and Afghanistan, it is also all the power centers and capitals of the
I
world
wish we,
powers.
we,
We
we
have to
had
fight them.
realized this 20, 25 years
Yeah.
ago. There was a time, Ali, I'll just give you one example. I was a student. I was in
Yes.
school, so I'm talking about mid 80s. Mid 80s means
Yes.
that almost 35 years ago. I was standing outside Pearl Continental Hotel. I mean, there used to be no gates, no walls. It was just hedge. And I saw two Sikhs taking photographs of cars. And there were a couple of Mercedes cars or something of that sort. And they had never seen so many Mercedes cars together. This was the state of economy of India, sir. What I'm saying is that since we lost that particular time, We couldn't capitalize much on that. Indians did. So we should also understand that India is a huge country.
But the Indian economy too is extremely vulnerable.
It's vulnerable still.
Particularly under the Modi government, and it has gone down. And also, I think we need to play our cards very smartly and in a smart manner to neutralize the influence, the expanding influence of India. I think we have a very strong relationship with China. Pakistan needs to, rebuild its economy and reinforce
So
its
economy is the name of the game.
Exactly.
I mean,
So
a country
I think
such as
one of the
Singapore, just because it's an economic giant within that.
The greatest
area.
vulnerability of Pakistan is its weak economy. As we are reading the figures today, our foreign loans have, they have surpassed the GDP of Pakistan,
Yes, sir.
$103 billion. So
Yeah.
that's the state of economy. So in this condition, Pakistan has to be very careful and very cautious. And I think we must make use of our alliance and friendship with China. China is ready to help us out in rebuilding our economy, rejuvenating our economy. And I think we have that talent. We have.
So
we should-
10 to 15 years, that is all you need. If you
Of
have
course.
your commitments right and if you have your direction
So
right.
we are, our government and internally our political people or the political leaders are entangled in an infight. And
And that is helping the Indians.
Exactly. And
Yeah, the enemy.
that's consuming the energies of the people of Pakistan.
Yeah. Quick 1 minute comment from you, Brigadier Saab, and then
Faisal,
over
we
to
are
Ali.
not living in a utopian world. And we can't be teaching moral characters and good things to the Americans and
You have to look
telling
inward as
them
well.
what is right and wrong. The world works on equation. For example, if we want to have influence over America, we can always go to Beijing and tell them, let's join together, and you have to plead our case with Washington on certain solid terms that you can. Of course, their economies are so intertwined, and the relationship
So
is
on
so
an honest
strategic.
note, now, whenever we say that the Indians have been isolated or
No,
Pakistan is, no, sir, it's not correct. Pakistan could not even muster the support of 12 members for the FATF, sir. We are still in the grey
We
list.
failed it. So
Though we have done so much, and I think the rules for Pakistan, they're so different now.
So we
God
can't
knows.
be teaching, as somebody said, the morals to the Americans.
But we need to
have
put our own house in
we have
order.
to-
That is the punchline, sir.
In the context of
We have
FATF.
to find ways to improve our own selves.
Absolutely.
And tell the people of Pakistan that this is not the right time for bifurcation of politics. or
Democracy is
infighting.
great, but Pakistan comes first.
Absolutely.
Last comment from you, Sayyid Muhammad Ali.
I think we just need to do 5 things right now. We need to have a very effective diplomacy, not just at the state level, but also at the public level in all capitals, and expose India. Number 2, we must legally contest Indian violations of human rights, and also the rising extremism should be a concern for FATF in America, for the Indian shareholders and investors. Third, we need to build economic integration with all neighbors except India, whether it is Iran, whether it is Afghanistan, whether it is China. We need to protect CPEC, which is vulnerable. It is very important that Kashmir freedom struggle is again not equated with terrorism, with ISIS or anybody which India will try in future. And lastly, most importantly, like Sadiq Saab rightly pointed out, we must close our ranks, and our ideological and ethnic diversity should not be exploited by India. And that is very important that our education policy, whether it is madrasa, whether it is state institutions, or whether it is private education, it must have a common narrative on our history and policy. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Sayyid Muhammad Ali. Thank you so much, Javed Siddiq Saab. Brigadier Tipu, it was a pleasure having you. And that's all we have for this hour. I'll see you tomorrow, inshallah. Till then, you take good care.